Thank you all for being here. Can I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional owners of the lands and waters on which we meet, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. As you know, Noongar people have managed and cared for land, rivers and seas that connect Australia to the Indian Ocean for thousands of years, and long before Europeans arrived here in the 1600s, Indigenous Australians were trading tools and exchanging culture with neighbours across seas as far back as 4,000 years ago. Australia remains home to the oldest continuous culture on the planet, and now is also home to people from more than 300 ancestries. A nation whose people share common ground with so many of the world's peoples, including peoples from around this ocean we face from here in Perth, our Indian Ocean capital. When we look west, Australians see the Indian Ocean and we see its people in our own reflection. More than 30,000 Australians that hail from Mauritius, the 50,000 Australians from East Africa, our diverse communities from across South Asia, and the nearly 1 million Australians of Indian ancestry. Indeed, some Australians who made their journey from East Africa trace their heritage back to migration from India at the turn of the last century. So with all of you, Australia is a proud custodian of the oceans. We share the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, almost one half of the world's Earth's surface. We take this responsibility seriously, and we know you do too. Not least the island nations of the Indian Ocean, who are custodians of more water than land, small islands with immense seas. You see, we are bound not just by shared geography, but by the shared destiny of our interests. And how we prosper will be determined by how we work together to achieve those shared interests. I'm very grateful to all of you for being here for this conference. A head of state, 17 ministers, secretaries general, and around 400 delegates from 34 countries. Let me particularly acknowledge His Excellency President Wickremesinghe of Sri Lanka. Mr. President, you have a strong history with this conference, and we are honoured by your first visit to Australia as President. I'm grateful to the India Foundation and to the Perth US Asia Centre for their support in hosting today's event. And I'm honoured to be hosting this conference with my friend, Dr. Jaishankar. Jai, you are an axis around which so much of this important discussion revolves, and I thank you for your leadership. I want to also acknowledge my many parliamentary colleagues who are here this evening, particularly our Western Australian parliamentary colleagues. I think there are some 11 in total. They include Matt Keogh, the Minister for Defence Personnel and Veterans Affairs, and the President of the Senate, Sue Lines, and Assistant Minister, the Minister who is the Assistant to the Prime Minister, Patrick Gorman. Can I also acknowledge and thank my outstanding Assistant Foreign Minister, Tim Watts, who is with us tonight. At the outset, I acknowledge we gather on the eve of the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine. And the devastating conflict in the Middle East continues, with 400,000 Palestinians in Gaza starving, 1 million at risk of starvation, and 1.7 million people in Gaza internally displaced, while more than 130 hostages are still being held by Hamas. The risk of regional escalation remains real, and the terrible toll of these conflicts underlines the importance of countries like ours working together to maintain peace and stability in our region. There's much talk these days of the Indo-Pacific, but many give more emphasis to the second half of that compound term. And the fact is, the same unprecedented threats that are facing the Pacific Ocean side of the region are also faced on the Indian Ocean side. The prosperity, peace and resilience we seek are being seriously challenged. Food, energy are in increasingly short supply. More people are displaced, more conflict risks and costs lives. The continued deterioration of the political, humanitarian and security situation in Myanmar not only affects its people profoundly, but also regional security. Elsewhere, flare-ups and tensions over disputed areas heighten the risk of escalation to conflict. Transnational crime and terrorism continue to challenge the security and economic prosperity of this region. And the pervasive challenge of irregular migration and people smuggling are felt deeply by many in this room and by us in Australia, as we discuss at the Bali process, the forum we co-host with Indonesia. The scourge of illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing threatens the blue economy and the livelihoods and stability that rely upon it. And the multilateral system is falling short of the commitments we have all agreed to. And of course, the climate is changing faster than our combined efforts to stop it. Many of our communities have been overwhelmed by floods and fires, and in just the past year, 33 million people in Pakistan, 7 million in Bangladesh have been displaced by floods. Africa has faced protracted droughts and cyclones. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that the Indian Ocean is warming faster than any other waters since the 1950s. So these warmer temperatures, along with other climate impacts, are predicted to induce decline in fish catches across the ocean, hurting nations that have a high dependency on fisheries and lack options to adapt to climate shocks. And just as the threat of warmer waters is felt in profound ways for low-lying Pacific atoll nations like Tuvalu, it is felt for Indian Ocean nations like Seychelles, which is only a few metres above sea level. Mauritius has estimated that half the island's beaches will be eroded in the next 50 years, and the recent oil spill there and the cargo ship fire in Sri Lanka are powerful reminders of these island ecosystems. Preserving our region demands slowing the destructive march of climate change. So I'm pleased to announce that Australia is launching a marine and coastal resilience hub under India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. The hub will drive deeper engagement and advance scientific research amongst Indo-Pacific partners on marine ecology, the threats of climate change and marine pollution, issues that matter deeply to the sustainability of our shared Indian Ocean. The IOC Blue Carbon Hub, led by our National Science Agency here in Perth, is also building capacity and empowering IORA members to protect and restore blue carbon ecosystems throughout the Indian Ocean. We know economic, climate and food insecurity are exacerbating humanitarian crises and disasters in the region. So Australia will continue to provide disaster preparedness and development assistance for healthcare, economic recovery and humanitarian support to Indian Ocean countries. Last financial year, Australia provided over $330 million in development assistance, including $100 million in humanitarian support to South Asia. Yet we also face other and growing threats to our security and our sovereignty. Throughout history, we have seen small countries at vast distances from major powers bear the brunt of a race for dominance. And the countries gathered here are no strangers to strategic competition and no strangers to its costs. As expanding military powers take a greater interest in our region, we each need to sharpen our focus on what our interests are and how to work together to uphold them. Building an Indian Ocean community, habits of cooperation and of collaboration, embracing our diversity as a strength in our partnership. And we need to forge and reinforce our regional architecture and shape a regional identity. As my friend Ibu Masudi, the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, said at the EAS, we all have our differences, but it is up to us to use these differences as a dividing force or to turn them into strengths that enrich our collective effort. See, each of us has an interest in preserving the sovereign character of our own region, of our own nations, and the open, inclusive and rules-based character of our region. So our shared focus must be on what we need to do so we can make our own choices according to our own laws and values and pursue our own prosperity respecting but not deferring to others, working in an open and transparent way that instills confidence in the choices that are offered, choices that are credible, that are genuine, and that are enduring. In many ways, the most serious scenario we must confront is the risk of strategic competition escalating into conflict. We face rising tensions across potential flashpoints in the region, from the Taiwan Strait to the Malacca Strait, with its critical connection to the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal. Disputes persist about land borders and maritime borders. As you've heard today, the Indian Ocean already hosts more than a third of the world's bulk cargo traffic and 2/3 of global oil shipments. Any slowdown or interruption from piracy, from disputes or disruptions would have costly consequences around the world, as has been all too apparent recently in the Red Sea. Countries of the Indo-Pacific face China's rapid military build-up without the transparency and reassurance that the region looks for from all great powers. But with an increasing level of commercial and military passage through the Indian Ocean comes a greater need for transparency and reassurance, because this is what guards against miscalculation and accidents. As the former Maldives Minister of State, Ahmed Khalil, has observed, the Indian Ocean may become a key threat for strategic competition between major rival powers. But our hope is that the Indian Ocean will not witness a security dilemma in which activities by larger outside powers to enhance their own security interests create insecurity for others in the region. It's important to understand for us all that our security can be challenged by actions that fall far short of conflict. Throughout the Indo-Pacific, there is a need to address disinformation, interference, opaque lending practices, and coercive trade measures. To manage such risks in a world where even research vessels have the potential to be tools for strategic goals. In some cases, secrecy is privileged over transparency, and principles of practice and practices of openness overlooked or abandoned. Fragility and poor governance are stretching scarce government resources and leading to worse outcomes for vulnerable populations. At the same time, international rules and norms are being reshaped, with some rights or goals abandoned in pursuit of others. And this all encroaches on the ability of countries to act in pursuit of their interests. Without the freedom to act within the bounds of agreed rules, we are constrained in our ability to maintain the balance of power we need for a prosperous and stable region. Our interests are clear: a region that is peaceful and predictable, that is governed by accepted rules and norms, where all of us can cooperate, can trade, and can thrive. Where a larger country does not determine the fate of a smaller country, where every country can pursue its own aspirations, and where no country dominates and no country is dominated. So rather than a closed hierarchy, we want a region characterised by openness and transparency that prioritises the regional resilience and autonomy of countries, the maintenance of peace and stability in the region, and adherence to international law and agreed rules and norms where sovereignty is respected. And what I would say to you is this vision for our region is grounded in sovereignty. What is sovereignty? It's a word we use often. I think at a fundamental level, it is about being able to make your own decisions and to shape your own future. It might be exercised alone, but it is best assured when we are working together, because no one country can achieve a region with the attributes I am describing by ourselves. We can only achieve this region if we all work together and if we all contribute to strategic balance. We are determined, from Australia's part, to make our contribution to this. We are investing in our own national power and applying all the tools of statecraft at our disposal. We are working with partners. We are investing in our diplomacy, and we are investing in capable military defence industry and partnerships, including through AUKUS, to contribute in our role as a security partner for the region. We believe deterrence and reassurance are both required to reduce the risk of conflict by demonstrating the high cost should conflict occur, alongside the advantages to all if it does not. Transparency is at the centre of our approach, setting standards for ourselves and expecting those standards are observed by others. We know without credible military capability, the efficacy of diplomacy is invariably diminished. And we know without ever more active diplomacy, the risk of military capabilities being called into service is greater. So we have opened new posts at Bengaluru, Kolkata and Male. We're strengthening our existing formal alliances with the United States and New Zealand and growing other partnerships. We are building trilateral initiatives with India and Indonesia, with India and France to coordinate on our shared interests in the Indian Ocean. We are deepening our partnerships with Japan and India, the Republic of Korea, the UK, France and the countries of Southeast Asia. And we are leveraging those partnerships for positive impact in the region. And the Quad's response to regional priorities is a prime example, as is donor coordination in the Pacific through Partners for the Blue Pacific. And as you know, we are stabilising our relationship with China without compromising on our interests or national security, recognising that we cannot manage difference or take forward our interests without engagement and dialogue. And we are deepening our historical commitment to multilateralism, demonstrating our respect for each other by upholding the same rules. This is the approach Australia has taken in relation to the International Court of Justice's ruling on provisional measures for Israel. In a joint statement with New Zealand last week, we expressed our respect for the independence of the ICJ and the critical role it plays in upholding international law and the rules-based order. We underlined that the decisions of the ICJ are binding on the parties to the case, and our shared expectation that Israel act in accordance with the ICJ ruling, including to enable the provision of basic services and humanitarian assistance. Here in our region, we know the less we all operate by the same rules, the less unified we are, the more likely it is that vulnerabilities will be exploited. Australia was proud to play a leading role with many of you in the negotiation of the High Seas Treaty and the Global Biodiversity Treaty. It was our people working side by side that created stronger protection for our oceans and ensured the interests and contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities are recognised. Australia believes in the importance of regional institutions, including the architecture that binds the region from ocean to ocean: ASEAN, the Pacific Islands Forum, and the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Of course, our commitment to these bodies is not new. We were the first non-member to establish formal relations with ASEAN, ASEAN's first dialogue partner, and we are founding members of both the Pacific Islands Forum and the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Our collective efforts and resources have aimed to respond to the region's needs and priorities, and that is why Australia, with our friends from India, is hosting this conference today. It is why Australia works to maintain the conditions for peace through our diplomacy while playing our part in transparent and collective deterrence of aggression. In our region, we see military power expanding, but measures to contain military conflict are not, and there are few concrete mechanisms for averting it. We seek to change the calculus for any potential aggressor so that no state ever concludes that the benefits of conflict outweigh the risks. We want to promote peace, and we have a long record of promoting peace in our region and beyond. including as I work in 1971 as a member of the UN Ad Hoc Committee seeking to establish the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace. And today we seek new measures for conflict prevention that reinforce the region's existing economic and security architecture. And it is gratifying to be here among so many other countries who share this goal and who bring so much history and experience of peace building and conflict resolution to the table. The Bay of Bengal arbitrations delimiting maritime boundaries are one example where states peacefully resolved overlapping, long-standing and sensitive claims under UNCLOS. We have learnt so much from the African Union's leadership and the powerful contribution of African countries to peace building throughout history. All around the world, let us work to lessen the risk of misunderstanding and miscalculation and to avert conflict. All of us have a role in deploying our collective statecraft, our influence, our networks and our capabilities towards this goal. This is the challenge that peace building must meet today. With India, the largest economy of this region, is central to our efforts to build a peaceful, safe and prosperous Indian Ocean. And the example India sets as a regional leader is essential to our efforts to uphold sovereignty and the rules. India and Australia, as partners and friends, are working to provide practical options in the region to help boost sovereign capability in the maritime domain, hosting Law of the Sea workshops to build capacity in the region on UNCLOS, maritime domain awareness and law enforcement. We will initiate a maritime leadership program to help build the skills, leadership and confidence of the region's senior operational leaders. And we will launch a civil maritime security postgraduate program, bringing together emerging policy leaders to deepen their expertise in international maritime law and security. And we look forward to working closely with India to co-lead IORA's Maritime Safety and Security Working Group over the next 2 years. Because building capacity and sovereignty in the maritime domain is central to the development of the blue economy, from which so much of the region's prosperity stems. Trade and tourism links are also key enablers of economic resilience, and we are invested in your success just as you are invested in ours. We are partnering with the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation to initiate a bankable pipeline of projects to improve connectivity in South Asia, including regional energy integration across Bhutan, Nepal, India and Bangladesh. And we are partnering with Sri Lanka on management of its air assets and design work for 2 ports in Bangladesh. All our efforts aim to help countries build their own resilience and sovereignty, to ensure countries can protect our great oceans, to ensure no one is held back by unsustainable debt. So I would say to you in closing, we are not a great power, we are a middle power or a substantial power. And our tradition and our interests are clear. Australia will always pursue a world where differences and disputes are settled through institutions, agreed rules and norms, and not by force and coercion. Australia will always remain a principled Indian Ocean power and a reliable Indian Ocean power, because this region is our region, and together we all get to determine its character, and we get to decide its future. Thank you very much.